What happens when life throws you into the deepest despair?
Mhm.
When everything you hold dear is stripped away and, the world seems utterly unjust?
It's a terrifying thought.
Can you find peace or even happiness in that pit? That's the profound question at the heart of a remarkable work we're diving into today.
We are.
We're opening up Anicius Manlius, Severinus, Boethius's The Consolation of Philosophy.
And this isn't just abstract thought experiments from some ivory tower, is it?
No, absolutely not.
To truly appreciate the consolation, you really have to understand the crucible it was forged in.
Right.
Boethius was this brilliant, highly educated Roman official in 6th century Italy, serving King Theodoric the Great.
He'd reached the very top, hadn't he?
Oh, completely. Consul, master of offices. His sons were consuls too. Peak worldly success.
And then, babe.
Then, bam, suddenly, unjustly, he's accused of treason, thrown in prison, sentenced to death.
Wow. So he wrote this book.
From his prison cell, yeah, facing execution. This is philosophy born out of a very real, personal, existential crisis.
He's grappling with suffering, not in theory, but as a lived, brutal reality.
Exactly. Life and death stuff.
And into this desperate scene, into Boethius's deep despair and confusion, comes this extraordinary figure.
Lady Philosophy.
Yes, Lady Philosophy. An allegorical figure, but so vivid.
She is indeed his visitor, his guide in that dark cell. She represents the pursuit of wisdom, absolutely.
But more than just intellectual wisdom.
Oh, yes. For Boethius, this pursuit is fundamentally seen as a path, a return to God. The text describes her descending from on high,
Appearing right when he needs her most.
Like a divine emissary, perhaps, or maybe even the personification of his own highest intellect reaching for truth.
And she sees right through his complaints, doesn't she? She knows it's deeper than just bad luck.
Right away. She sees he's not just sad or worried, he's in a profound spiritual and intellectual crisis. A kind of sickness.
She doesn't just offer easy answers, does she?
No platitudes here. She's presented as a physician of the soul. She literally tells him he's suffering from an illness, a wound.
And she needs him to. Why, understand the wound.
Exactly. If he wants her help, he has to reveal its true nature. His suffering isn't just misfortune. It's a symptom of something deeper.
Something that needs diagnosis and healing.
She's the doctor. He's the patient who's lost his way, wandered from his true home.
Which she identifies as
God. As that pure wisdom, which is the self-sufficient living mind and soul, primeval reason of all things.
So our mission today is to really unpack this incredible dialogue
between the suffering prisoner and his divine guide.
Exactly. We'll explore their core arguments about, suffering, true happiness, the seemingly random turns of fortune.
That whole perplexing problem of evil.
Right. Why do good people suffer? And then the big one, fate and free will and the nature of God.
It covers so much ground.
And crucially, we want to figure out why this work, written to such specific, dire circumstances, has offered solace and, deep insight for centuries.
It really has. It's influenced some major thinkers.
Okay, let's unpack this. Journey into the heart of the consolation, guided by Lady Philosophy herself.
Let's do it.
So the stage is set. Boethius, once this incredibly powerful official,
hugely respected,
now reduced to a despairing prisoner. He's utterly crushed by grief and this just searing sense of injustice.
He's lost everything that mattered in the worldly sense. His high office, his wealth, his reputation, his freedom.
Even his good name, right? Falsely accused.
Completely. He feels totally betrayed. By the world, by the king, by what he thought was justice.
And he doesn't hold back in the beginning, does he? He really pours out his misery.
No, the opening pages are raw lamentation. He's raging against the fickleness of fortune, the cruelty of his enemies.
And just the apparent cosmic unfairness of it all.
Yes, he explicitly complains about the undeserved power of the wicked. He sees them flourishing while he, who tried to be good and serve the state, is destroyed.
It must have been the bitterest pill, believing in order and justice and then seeing this.
Precisely. It makes him question everything. Is the world just ruled by chaotic chance? Are malicious forces in charge? Where is God in all this?
It's a very human cry of anguish.
Absolutely. And then, into this literal and figurative darkness, she appears.
Lady Philosophy. And it's quite an entrance, as you said. Not subtle.
No, it's a powerful vision, he describes, descending from on high, radiating this almost supernatural presence.
And her appearance is symbolic, changing as he watches.
Yes, very much so. He describes her height as varying. Sometimes she seems, ordinary human size.
Representing.
Practical philosophy. ethics, politics, the wisdom needed for worldly affairs, the kind he thought he was practicing.
But other times?
Other times, she seems to grow incredibly tall, her head piercing the very sky, lost in the heavens.
Wow. And that represents?
Higher forms of philosophy, theoretical philosophy, metaphysics, the kind that leads the mind upwards towards contemplating eternal truths.
Towards God.
Ultimately, yes, towards God. It's like she embodies the whole spectrum of wisdom.
Able to meet him in his immediate earthly pain.
Exactly, but also able to lift his gaze much, much higher.
She is the personification of philosophy, the love of wisdom.
But framed in a way that sees true wisdom as fundamentally connected to divinity. She defines the ultimate goal as pursuing that pure wisdom.
Which he identifies as God.
Yes, the self-sufficient living mind and sole primeval reason of all things. It's clear, philosophy isn't just an academic game for him.
It's a spiritual path.
A spiritual discipline, a return and recall of the soul from its wandering back to its true home in this divine mind. She's his guide, his physician.
Leading him back to spiritual health and understanding.
Back to God.
And the structure of the work itself, this dialogue format, reflects that journey, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's presented as a consolation, a healing process through conversation, through intellectual engagement.
She is his teacher.
Systematically dismantling his faulty assumptions, his despairing arguments. But she's also a dispute. She lets him voice his objections, his pain, his questions. And then she patiently, rationally addresses them.
So she's a philosopher, but also uses poetry.
Yes, she weaves verses throughout the prose. It's a mix of forms, typical of Menippean satire, prose for the heavy arguments, poetry for perhaps emotional resonance or summing things up.
It makes it feel more dynamic.
It does, and it has roots in classical dialogues, like Cicero's works exploring similar themes.
But she doesn't always stick to strict back and forth.
No, sometimes she needs to lay out a more complex argument, so she'll shift into longer explanations. The form serves the content.
It feels very deliberate, this mix of logic and lyricism, almost mirroring the process itself.
I think it does. Moving from emotional turmoil towards rational understanding, she has to acknowledge his pain first, treat the immediate symptoms.
His complaints against fortune and injustice.
Right, and then gently but firmly lead him step by step towards the deeper philosophical truths, the ones that offer real, lasting consolation.
It's like a therapy session and a philosophy lecture rolled into one.
In a way, yes. A pedagogical journey within the text itself.
Okay, so Lady Philosophy arrives, finds Boethius completely broken down intellectually and emotionally. And her first major move, after basically telling the muses of poetry who are comforting him to get lost.
Yeah, she kicks them out, says they offer the wrong kind of medicine.
Right. Her first real act is that diagnosis you mentioned. She tells him his suffering isn't really caused by the prison, the loss.
The external stuff.
It's caused by something internal.
Exactly. She identifies his problem as a kind of amnesia, a forgetfulness.
Forgetting what?
Forgetting his true nature and forgetting the true nature of the good. Specifically, his suffering stems from an unhealthy attachment to what she calls false goods.
False goods.
Right.
Okay. What exactly falls into that category for her?
Well, it's the classic list, really. The things people chase after in the world.
Like,
Wealth, fame, power, high office, physical pleasures. Even things like having a wonderful family, if you treat them as the ultimate source of your happiness.
the very things Boethius had in abundance before his fall.
Precisely. The things he's now grieving the loss of so intensely.
But I mean, they feel good, don't they? They seem desirable. Why does she insist on calling them false?
Because, philosophy argues, they are inherently fleeting. They're external. They're ultimately insufficient to provide genuine, lasting happiness or security.
They don't belong to you deep down.
Exactly. They are external to the self. They're gifts of fortune given by the world and just as easily taken away by the world.
For relying on them makes you vulnerable.
Terribly vulnerable. Because they are external and unstable, possessing them is always precarious. They can't give you true security.
She explains that people chase these things thinking they're pieces of happiness, right?
Yes. They think wealth brings sufficiency, power brings control, fame brings respect, pleasure brings joy. But she argues their true value, their true substance, only exists when they're understood as flowing from the one true good.
And united in it.
United in the true good. When you chase them as separate goals, they're just fragments, incomplete. They can't actually deliver what they seem to promise.
Ah, okay. So they're like scattered pieces of a puzzle. People grab one piece, say, wealth, and think it's the whole picture of happiness.
That's a great way to put it. And trying to build your happiness on just one or two of these fragmented external pieces is fundamentally unstable. It's like building on sand.
Did she give examples?
Oh, powerful ones. She talks about the seeming power of kings.
Right. They look like they have total control.
They sit on their thrones, looking all lofty, wielding immense power over others. But philosophy says, look closer, inwardly.
What? They're not in control?
Often they're enslaved by their own passions. She says they're fettered by lust, anger, sorrow, even hope.
So despite the outward show, they're controlled by their own internal states, like puppets.
Pretty much. They live in constant worry. Fear of losing power, fear of assassination, fear of rebellion. She argues, quite paradoxically,
That they might actually be more miserable.
yes, they might have a larger share of misery than ordinary people because their position makes them targets, and it amplifies their internal turmoil.
And their power isn't even really their own.
No, it depends on bodyguards, courtiers, subjects. They're less independent than they appear. She mentions figures like Seneca, Papinian,
Powerful men who ended up
destroyed by the very rulers they served. Even trying to retire didn't save them, proving that worldly power offers no real safety.
Wow. That absolutely flips the script on how we usually think about power and success. The person on top might be the most trapped.
It forces a complete reevaluation, doesn't it? What is true well-being? What is true power?
And philosophy connects this pursuit of worldly goods directly to misery.
Yes, because they are so unstable. When fortune flatters you with false happiness, as she puts
To
it,
get lured in,
you think these things will last, that they'll bring security and joy. But it's fortune's nature to be inconstant. That's the crucial point.
so when she inevitably turns,
Which philosophy says is her normal behavior, her true self. You're completely unprepared. And you're plunged into sorrow and despair, like Boethius was.
so the mistake wasn't just experiencing the bad turn, but ever expecting her to stay good in the first place, like trusting a known liar.
Exactly. If you put your faith in her and she leaves you ruined, then her gifts were never really blessings. They were warnings of disaster waiting to happen.
Relying on her is like, what was that analogy?
Committing your boat to the winds and waves without a rudder or a destination, you just go wherever they blow, completely at the mercy of external forces.
That's incredibly vivid.
Mhm.
It just underscores the total lack of control you have when your happiness is tied up in the external world.
It emphasizes the vulnerability, the fragility. True happiness, therefore, must be something fundamentally dissonant, something internal.
Which brings us to her definition of the true good, the ultimate happiness. What is it?
It is the ultimate happiness for humanity, the summum bonum, and it is found only and completely in God.
Only in God.
Philosophy argues that God is perfect goodness, perfect beauty, perfect unity, perfect power. He is the single, simple source of everything that is truly good.
And happiness is God, not just something God gives you.
It's an identity, a really profound identification. Philosophy argues there can't be two separate highest goods.
Okay, why not?
Because if there were two, neither would be truly highest or perfect. If God is the highest good, then happiness, which is the ultimate object of all human desire, must be identical with God.
So all those things people chase in the world, wealth, power, fame,
They are only truly unified and perfected in God. They find their source and their completion in Him. Seeking them separately is like chasing shadows or broken pieces.
you miss the one unified source where their real value resides.
Exactly. All particular goods derive their goodness from the one simple, perfect good that is God.
What's fascinating here is how philosophy immediately radically pivots Boethius away from blaming his external circumstances.
A king, his enemies, fortune.
Right. She pivots into an internal diagnosis. Your suffering isn't caused by what you've lost, but by what you valued in the first place.
That's a complete paradigm shift, isn't it? It moves the whole focus of the problem and therefore the solution from out there
To in here, inside his own mind and values.
It puts the responsibility not on the world's injustice, but on how he chose to define and pursue happiness.
That is a radical shift. And it really sets the stage for everything else she teaches him.
Absolutely. She has to convince him the problem lies within his own misguided desires and intellectual confusion first. Only then can she offer the path to true, lasting consolation,
Which is found in aligning with the true good.
which is God.
It certainly makes you reflect on our own lives today, doesn't it?
Yes.
Are we chasing the modern versions of these false goods?
Oh, definitely. Social media likes, career status, accumulating more stuff than we need.
That pursuit makes us just as vulnerable, doesn't it? when those external things shift or disappear, or even when we get them and find they're empty.
The core dynamic is identical. The lesson about the instability of worldly things and the danger of pinning our deepest hopes on them feels incredibly timeless. Urgently relevant, even.
Okay, so building on that idea of fortune's instability, Lady Philosophy really digs into the nature of chance and change, this idea of fickle fortune versus some underlying divine order.
Yes, this is crucial. She needs Boethius to understand that fortune hasn't, arbitrarily turned against him out of malice. That's not what's happening.
So what is happening?
She argues that fortune has simply been true to her deepest nature, and her nature is change itself.
Her inconstancy is her only constancy.
That's it exactly. The turns of fortune's wheel rising and falling, good times, bad times, that's her normal, expected behavior.
Boethius just hadn't fully grasped that when things were going well for him.
Right. He was like someone enjoying a sunny day at sea, forgetting that storms are also part of the sea's nature. He mistook temporary favor for permanence.
So that popular image of fortune's wheel, even if not explicitly detailed as a wheel in the text,
it captures the essence perfectly. Rising high one moment, dash to the bottom the next. Unpredictable, unreliable, worldly fortune.
and she contrasts this sharply with divine providence.
Very sharply. Philosophy explains that while fortune seems to operate randomly in the temporal realm, messing with individuals' lives, there is, in fact, a deeper governing order. Providence,
Yeah.
which is God's eternal, simple, unified plan for the entire universe. Fate, she explains, is different.
How so?
Fate is the temporal, sequential working out of that eternal plan. It's how providence unfolds within the world of time and change through cause and effect.
She even calls nature the daughter of providence.
Yes, suggesting that even the predictable patterns we see in the natural world are part of this larger divine design, woven by fate according to the pattern of providence.
So what looks like random luck or cruel injustice from our limited ground-level perspective
Is actually part of a much larger, perfectly ordered divine plan that we simply cannot fully grasp from inside time.
that's a huge concept to absorb.
It is, and understanding this distinction is absolutely key to Boethius's consolation. Philosophy encourages him to accept whatever happens on fortune's playground.
But only once he's chosen to play on it.
Exactly. She basically says, look, you chose to play the game of worldly ambition with all its risks and rewards, these unpredictable turns, they're just part of the game.
So if you can't handle the bumps,
Then you need to get off the playground. If you shudder at her unreliability, then the only rational thing to do is turn away and have nothing more to do with her dangerous games.
it's not just grim acceptance then. It's a call to detach from the source of the instability.
Precisely. Detach your sense of well-being from the inherently unstable external world. Identify happiness with something else.
And she says fortune's very changeableness should actually make her less scary and less attractive.
Yes. Why be terrified of losing something you were never going to keep forever anyway? Why be lured by temporary gifts that will inevitably be taken back, leaving you feeling worse off?
Her threats lose their terror, her gifts lose their allure once you see her for what she is.
Exactly. Which powerfully reinforces her earlier point. True happiness must be something internal, something stable,
Something fortune cannot touch.
cannot give, cannot take away. Which leads back again to the true good.
God.
God. Boethius's initial despair came from seeing only random injustice, the undeserved power of the wicked. Philosophy lifts his gaze.
To see the underlying divine order, providence, even when fate looks chaotic or cruel up close.
Yes, it's about perspective.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just about stoically putting up with bad luck.
No.
It's about understanding that the luck itself, good or bad, isn't the ultimate reality. It's just one layer.
There's a deeper, ordered reality beneath it. It's a fundamental shift from focusing on the surface chaos of events to trusting in the deeper, governing order, even if you can't fully see or understand it right now from inside the suffering.
That idea of suffering that seems random, especially in a world supposedly governed by a good God, leads right into the next huge problem Boethius raises.
The problem of evil.
Yes, the classic question. If God is all good and all-powerful, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do the wicked seem to prosper?
This is maybe the most agonizing question when you're the one suffering unjustly. Boethius sees his enemies, who he knows acted wickedly, sitting pretty, enjoying power.
While he, who tried to be virtuous, is ruined and facing death. It seems backward.
How can a just God allow this? It cuts right to the heart of faith and reason, and Lady Philosophy's response is, well, it's radical, it's counterintuitive.
What's her core argument? Does she deny God's goodness or power?
No, she upholds both. Instead, she argues that, from the perspective of the true good, the wicked are not powerful at all. They are utterly powerless.
Powerless. The guys who put him in prison.
Powerless in the truest sense. And furthermore, she argues, they actually suffer more truly, more profoundly, than the good people they harm, even when they look successful on the outside.
Okay, that sounds completely backwards from everyday experience. How does she justify that? How can they be powerless?
It comes from a deep philosophical idea, one she connects to Plato and the Neoplatonists like Plotinus. The idea that evil isn't a real thing in itself.
Not a positive force.
No. Evil is defined as a privation, a lack of good.
Like blindness is a lack of sight, or cold is a lack of heat.
Exactly like that. Since God is the highest good, the source of all being and reality, moving away from God is moving away from being itself.
Towards the nothingness.
Towards a state of nothingness, yes.
Right.
Towards a lack of true power, a lack of substance. The wicked, by choosing evil, by turning away from the good.
They are actually diminishing themselves.
Yeah.
Moving away from reality.
That's the argument. Their worldly success is just an illusion from this higher perspective. Their power is empty, impotent, because it's not aligned with the true good, which is the source of all genuine power.
They can't achieve true happiness through wicked means because those means cut them off from the source of happiness itself.
Precisely. And they're suffering. How do they suffer more than the good man in prison?
Yeah, that's the really hard part to swallow.
Philosophy argues that virtue is its own inherent reward, and vice is its own inherent punishment.
How so?
Good deeds never lack their reward because the reward is goodness itself, the state of a virtuous soul, aligned with the good, aligned with God.
And that internal state can't be touched by external forces.
Cannot be taken away, no matter what fortune does. The wickedness of others, she says, can never wrest their individual glory from the good.
Okay, so the reward of being good is the state of being good, which is untouchable, and the punishment for wickedness.
Is the state of being wicked itself, the degradation of the soul, the twisting away from its true purpose, the separation from God, the highest good?
Which leads to her most challenging claim.
That when the wicked go unpunished in the world, they are actually more unhappy than if they receive just punishment.
That is so counterintuitive. Punishment seems like suffering. Getting away with it seems like winning.
From a worldly view, yes. But from philosophy's perspective, where vice is the ultimate harm to the self, allowing the wicked to continue in their vice without any corrective check.
Means they just sink deeper.
Deeper into that state of nothingness, deeper into separation from the good, deeper into true internal unhappiness. Their outward success is just a mask over a decaying soul.
Does she talk about punishment after death?
She mentions it briefly, says there is punishment for the soul, sometimes corrective, sometimes purifying, but she quickly says that's too big a topic for now. She keeps the focus on the inherent consequences of virtue and vice for the soul in this life.
This raises an important question. How willing are we, really, to accept such a radical redefinition of power and suffering?
It's tough.
It requires completely shifting our perspective away from external appearances, who has the money, the status, the freedom, towards the internal state of the soul.
It's alignment, or lack thereof, with the true good. Can we truly believe that the successful tyrant is more miserable than the virtuous prisoner?
It forces you to ask, what do you believe constitutes true well-being? Is it what the world sees, or something deeper?
A profound question she leaves us with.
Now, we venture into what is arguably the most famous section of the Consolation, certainly the most philosophically dense.
Book v fate, free will, divine foreknowledge.
Exactly. Reconciling God's providence and knowledge with genuine human freedom. This is where Boethius tackles a problem that has tied thinkers in knots for millennia.
It's the philosophical peak of the work. Boethius, having accepted the idea of an all-good, all-powerful God ordering the universe through providence,
Immediately sees the clash.
Right. The apparent conflict with free will. If God is omniscient, if he knows everything that will happen, including my future choices.
Doesn't that mean my choices are fixed? Predetermined?
If God knows with absolute certainty that I will choose vanilla ice cream tomorrow, is it even possible for me to choose chocolate? Does God's knowledge necessitate my action, making my feeling of freedom an illusion?
It feels like an inescapable logical trap. If God knows it, it must happen. If it must happen, how can I be free to choose otherwise?
It's a powerful dilemma. Philosophy acknowledges the difficulty but offers a brilliant, if challenging, solution. It hinges on the nature of God's knowledge versus human knowledge.
Okay, how are they different?
The key, she explains, is that God's knowledge isn't like human sequential foresight. We exist within time. We experience reality linearly, past, present, future.
Right. Our predictions are based on looking forward down the timeline.
We foresee things by extrapolating from the present, based on causes, probabilities, patterns. It's a step-by-step sequential process.
But God's knowledge isn't like that.
No. God, she argues, exists entirely outside of time, in an eternal, simultaneous present.
An eternal now.
An eternal now. From God's perspective, there is no past or future in our sense. All of reality, the entire sweep of time, is simply present to the divine mind, all at once, in a single, unified vision.
God doesn't foresee my future actions like looking down a road.
He simply sees them, eternally present within his knowledge, just as clearly as you see what's happening right in front of you right now. His knowledge is founded upon truth. It perfectly grasps reality as it is.
But it doesn't impose necessity on things.
It doesn't impose necessity on things that don't have it by their own nature. His seeing doesn't cause...
Okay, so it's like, imagine looking at a finished movie versus watching it unfold frame by frame. We experience the frames sequentially, in time.
Right.
But God sees the entire movie, start to finish, all at once, eternally.
That's a helpful analogy, yes. God's perspective is one of perfect eternal presence. And she clarifies the providence-fate distinction again here.
How does that fit in?
Providence is God's simple, unified, eternal plan, the whole movie seen at once. Fate is the temporal, sequential unfolding of that plan within the created order of the movie playing out frame by frame through cause and effect in time.
Okay, but the crucial step is, how does this eternal simultaneous knowledge not remove our free will? That's still the sticking point.
Right. This is where philosophy introduces a critical distinction about different kinds of necessity.
Two kinds, okay.
She argues that an event can be necessary when considered in relation to divine knowledge, but still be completely free and unrestricted when considered in itself, based on its own nature or cause.
Okay, break that down carefully. Necessary in one sense, but free in another.
Yes. First, there's simple necessity. This applies to things that are necessary by their very nature, universally, unconditionally. Like it's simply necessary that all humans are mortal. That's just how it is.
Got it. And the other kind?
Conditional necessity. This applies when something becomes necessary only if a certain condition is met. Her example is, if you know that someone is walking right now.
Then it's necessary that they are walking.
Yes, conditionally necessary. Your knowledge being true makes their walking necessary relative to your knowledge. Because if you know it, it must be happening.
Okay, so how does this apply to God and free will?
Here's the linchpin. The conditional necessity that arises from God, knowing a future free action, does not imply simple necessity for the action itself. Meaning, just because God, in his eternal present, knows that you will freely choose vanilla tomorrow, that knowledge doesn't force you to choose vanilla. You are still making that choice based on your own will, your desires, freely.
But because God knows it.
Because God knows you are choosing it as eternally present to him, it is conditionally necessary that you make that choice when you do. The necessity attaches to the knowledge corresponding to the event, not to the cause of the event.
So God's knowledge is like my seeing someone walking right now. My seeing it doesn't make them walk or remove their freedom to stop. I'm just observing what is presently freely happening.
Precisely.
And God's eternal knowledge observes all actions, past, present, future, from our view as eternally present, but the observation itself doesn't cause or compel the free ones.
That is exactly the argument. The necessity resides in the truth of God's perfect knowledge mirroring reality, not in some force compelling your will. Your future free action is a reality, a truth, and God's knowledge perfectly apprehends that truth eternally.
It's subtle but profound.
It is. And this reconciliation, subtle as it is, allows philosophy to uphold both God's absolute omniscience and eternal plan, providence, and genuine human free will.
Which means we are still responsible for our choices.
Yes. Our choices are truly our own, freely made, even though they are perfectly and eternally known by God.
And this connects back to those different levels of knowing she discussed. Sense, imagination, reason, intellect.
Briefly, yes. She points out that different beings know according to their capacities. God's knowledge is pure, intuitive intellect grasping everything simply, eternally. Our human knowledge, especially reason, is often sequential, time-bound, piecing things together.
So understanding this hierarchy helps us see how God's knowing is different from ours.
Exactly, and maybe glimpse, however faintly, how things can be both known eternally by God and yet genuinely free from our temporal perspective. We're called to try and ascend towards that more immediate, intuitive way of knowing, closer to God's.
It raises an important question, though. Even if the logic holds, can our finite, time-bound minds truly grasp the nature of an eternal present? It feels almost beyond conception.
I think philosophy herself acknowledges the limits of human reason when facing divine mysteries. Source 5 suggests she doesn't entirely rule out human ignorance about the full workings of providence.
So maybe fully accepting this requires not just intellectual assent, but also a degree of, well, faith, or a different way of seeing.
Perhaps. Perhaps trusting in an order we can't fully map out is part of the consolation itself, letting go of the need to fit divine logic perfectly into human categories.
Now, the Consolation dives into these huge philosophical questions, but it's also widely seen as a work deeply rooted in a particular worldview, isn't it?
Excellent.
It famously doesn't mention Christ explicitly, or core Christian doctrines like the Trinity, the Incarnation, the Church.
Yeah, and none of that specific dogma is there.
And yet, it's revered as a cornerstone of Christian philosophy. How does that work?
It works because its fundamental framework, its underlying assumptions about reality, are deeply Christian, interpreted mainly through a Neoplatonic philosophical lens that Christians found very compatible.
Like what specifically?
Well, the core ideas. God as the supreme, simple, perfect good, the summum bonum. God is the ultimate source of all being, the creator and benevolent ruler of the universe.
Holding everything together through love.
Yes, that cosmic love that binds the universe is a key theme. The whole concept of divine providence governing everything, the inherent value of the soul and its pursuit of virtue, understanding evil as a lack, a privation.
These are all central to Christian thought, even without the specific narrative.
Exactly. They align strongly with a Christian worldview, which itself had already been synthesizing Greek philosophy with revelation for centuries. Boethius was a master of this synthesis.
So it's Christian in its bones, you could say, rather than in specific theological details.
It's a good way to put it. And this is precisely what made it so incredibly influential. Boethius was steeped in classical learning. Remember, he wanted to translate and comment on all of Plato and Aristotle.
An insane ambition. Trying to harmonize those two giants.
Right, and in the Consolation, he draws heavily on Plato, on Neoplatonists like Plotinus, that idea of evil as privation comes straight from them, and also on Stoic ideas about virtue and detachment.
He weaved them all together.
He synthesizes these classical ideas using their philosophical language and concepts, but integrates them within a framework that wasn't just compatible with Christian belief, it actively supported it. It gave philosophical muscle to theological ideas.
So he effectively built a bridge between the ancient philosophical world and the emerging Christian intellectual world of the Middle Ages.
A crucial bridge. He made classical thought accessible and relevant for a Christian audience, showing how reason and faith could work together. This made the Consolation absolutely foundational for medieval philosophy and education.
He was seen as a key authority figure, an auctor.
Hugely important, not just for this work, but also his technical writings on logic and the subjects of the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. His influence on the medieval curriculum was just immense.
And its impact went way beyond the classroom, didn't it? It influenced major literary and philosophical figures.
Oh, tremendously. It was one of the most copied, translated, and commented on books throughout the Middle Ages. Thomas Aquinas engages with it. Dante Alighieri.
Dante was huge.
Profoundly influenced. Dante deeply admired and imitated the Consolation. You see it in the Divine Comedy's structure, alternating prose and poetry conceptually, its intellectual ambition. He even aimed to sort of surpass it.
And didn't Dante borrow that famous final line?
The love that moves the sun and other stars. Yes, that echoes Boethius' description of cosmic love in Book 2, Meter 8, the love that binds the elements and sustains the cosmos. Dante saw how Boethius powerfully combined argument with emotion and imagery.
And Chaucer, too?
Geoffrey Chaucer translated the Consolation into Middle English. That shows how vital it still was in his time and helped keep it accessible.
And beyond these famous names, you mentioned it provided solace to countless ordinary individuals facing hardship.
Yes, for centuries, People in crisis facing imprisonment like Boethius, illness, loss, political chaos, persecution, or just struggling with the sheer unfairness of life, they turned to the Consolation.
For comfort and understanding.
Exactly. It was often read alongside the Book of Job, another deep dive into suffering and divine justice. It offered a framework, philosophical and spiritual, to make sense of seemingly senseless hardship.
Giving hope by shifting focus.
By lifting the gaze from temporal injustice to an eternal truth, to God's nature, it provided rational arguments for trusting in providence even when everything looked like chaos or malice.
Though you mentioned the concept of love is maybe different from later Christian thought.
Yes, it's worth noting. Philosophy presents love for God very intellectually as the natural desire of all created things to return to their source, the good. It's less about the affective, emotional, personal relationship with God that becomes more prominent in later medieval mysticism. Boethius's path is primarily one of intellectual ascent and reorientation.
So it's this powerful blend of rigorous argument and deep spiritual insight. A roadmap for navigating despair by changing your perspective, your values, your understanding of reality and God.
Precisely. It's about an inner transformation, reorienting the soul towards the true, unchanging good.
We've taken a true deep dive into Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy today. We've followed his journey from the depths of despair in that prison cell.
Guided step by step by Lady Philosophy.
Through her illuminating arguments, we explored her initial radical diagnosis that his suffering wasn't really about external loss, but about valuing false, fleeting goods.
And learned that true, lasting happiness is found only in the eternal, unchanging nature of God, the highest good itself.
We saw how she reframed the chaos of fortune's wheel, placing it within the context of divine providence, urging detachment from the unstable world.
We grappled with that tough view on evil, that the wicked are ultimately powerless, suffering more truly because evil is just a lack of being, a turning from goodness.
And we navigated that incredibly complex peak, reconciling God's eternal, timeless knowledge with real human free will.
Understanding how God's knowledge sees free actions without causing them.
And we touched on its absolutely immense legacy, how it bridged classical and Christian thought, shaped medieval minds like Aquinas, Dante, Chaucer.
And continued offering profound solace and intellectual tools to people facing their own dark nights.
The core message just resonates across centuries. External circumstances, no matter how terrible, cannot define our inner state or cut us off from the ultimate good, God.
A powerful message indeed.
So what does this all mean for you right now? If you find yourself wrestling with loss, injustice, uncertainty, the unfairness of it all, does Boethius's journey offer a different lens?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Boethius found his consolation, his peace, not by escaping prison or changing his circumstances, remember. He stayed there until his execution.
Right. The consolation wasn't external.
No. It came from fundamentally shifting his perspective, moving his focus from the temporal injustices and suffering he faced
to the eternal, unchanging nature of divine goodness, truth, and providence. Boethius's final remarkable work suggests that the deepest wisdom, the most enduring peace, the most genuine happiness, they aren't found by changing the difficult circumstances of our lives,
but by changing our understanding of them.
And by seeking that true, immutable good that lies forever beyond fortune's treacherous reach. What aspects of your own life might look profoundly different if viewed not through the lens of worldly loss and gain, but from the perspective of Boethius's prison cell, illuminated by the timeless wisdom of Lady Philosophy?